When I arrived at the hospital, the receptionist inquired if I had a living will and if I had brought it with me. "Yes, I did," I replied. "But I didn't bring it since I was only supposed to bring what I needed to the hospital." I never imagined I'd need my living will. My husband was directed to the waiting room while I was led to the pre-op area. I was honest with the personnel while lying on the gurney in pre-op. They were setting off medical drips and asking typical questions about my medications and allergies. Anxiety caused my eyes to well up. "You appear agitated," the nurse observed. "Well, you would be if your heart was in someone else's hands." "Well, this isn't emergency surgery," she replied. "You know you can get up from this table and go away." Was it a foreshadowing or a subtle suggestion that she knew something about the doctor in the surgery that she couldn't tell me? In retrospect, she appeared concerned about me. When the anesthesiologist arrived, I told him, "I know you're the most important person in the operating room." My blood pressure dropped substantially and quickly. He told me everything will be all right. I asked the nurse whether my spouse might accompany me. Seeing each other was reassuring for both of us. They soon began taking me to the surgery room. The nurse in the corridor asked my husband if he wanted to give me one last kiss. We had no idea that those remarks would torment him for the next 2 days. As I climbed onto the operating table, I was struck by the room's equipment, particularly the massive 6-screen television. I motioned for the anesthesiologist to remove the mask from my face. I requested that he and the surgeon take good care of me. "What the hell happened?" I heard my oldest son exclaim outside my hospital bed 2 days later. "She didn't sign up for this." He wanted to know how I ended up on a ventilator and with 12 tubes flowing out of my bloated body. I'd been told that the ablation operation would take about 5 hours and that I would need to stay in the hospital for 1 night for observation. I asked the doctor during my last visit if he was excellent at what he did and if he knew what he was doing. He said he was, and he was. It had been about 7 hours after I'd gone into surgery, and my husband could not obtain an answer from the receptionist about how much longer we would be. She then said that she knew what was going on with me, but she was forbidden from telling him. After a few moments, the doctor emerged and motioned my husband into a rear office. He informed him that they had lost me on the table and that my last chance of survival was to be placed in an induced hypothermia coma. He told I had a 42% chance of survival, but he couldn't say whether I'd be normal, a vegetable, or someplace in between. They needed his authorization to move forward. He concurred. Everything was fine according to the hospital report until the doctor made one more swipe and punctured a hole in the back wall of my heart. I bled into the sac, leaving no place for the heart to beat. When they placed a drain into the peritoneum to drain the blood, I was set up on the side of the table, and someone was caressing my chest and back heavily. Then I remember being conscious of being beaten up and bouncing up and down on my back. Later, I discovered that my heart had stopped for 39 minutes, and they performed 3,900 chest compressions and 15 shocks to get my heart to pulse again. This can't be right. This can't be right, I thought. Something terrible has happened. Her face is white. Her face is gray, a woman said. The hospital staff corroborated these happenings some weeks later. I imagined myself trapped in a 4-sided box with solid black walls. I felt extremely tranquil and quiet all of a sudden, and I thought to myself, I guess this is how it's going to finish for me. I felt dumb for having never considered how I might die. Everything was pitch black until I noticed a white egg-shaped dome in the distance beyond my feet. It was made of several colors of white leaded glass. I remember gazing down on my body in bed, and a nurse approaching me and saying, "This is your heparin." I noticed another individual standing behind her. I thought the nurse was a bad person and wanted to attack her, but I was paralyzed and there was no one to aid me. This occurred twice. I was placed in hypothermic coma. They lowered my body temperature to 83 degrees by injecting 39 degrees saline into my body through a tube on my right femoral artery. This would take 24 hours, followed by another 24 hours of warning. Meanwhile, My family traveled and drove in from all over the country to see what would happen. I rapidly earned the moniker, the Code White, and it appeared that everyone in the hospital recognized me. Everyone involved in coronary care, including the hospital director, did. Every minute for the following 2 days, a nurse was in my room, monitoring and recording every change in my body. I had 8 IV bags with me. They gave me medication if my blood pressure rose. If it failed, they replaced it with something else. I had every machine imaginable on my bed to keep me alive, while allowing my brain to rest and recover. I was warmed up about midnight, 2 days after my heart stopped, and after my vitals were stable, they took me off the paralytic. My family was told not to surprise me for fear of breaking my heart. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand," my spouse said, and I did. My sister requested that I squeeze with my other hand, which I did. I was told to move my toes by the nurses. No worries. The family was overjoyed. I had escaped with no injuries, but I was weak and fatigued. I knew I wasn't in a standard recovery room when I awoke, and I was in grave trouble. I had equipment and tubes all over the place. The majority of my family was present, and I sensed things were not going well. Plus, I remember some of what happened in the operation room, so I knew something wasn't right. When the operation room nurses learned I was awake, they came in. Because I still had tubes in my throat, I gave them the thumbs up. The nurse who told me I didn't have to stay for the procedure claimed she'd been worried about me for 2 days and felt bad about what had transpired. I'd got enough experience with a fibrillation to not only feel it, but also read the cardiac monitor. Despite this, I was still in a fibrillation. When the doctor arrived, I informed him, "I'm done with ablations." He claimed he was as well. The director of the coronary unit acknowledged that at least 3 procedures had gone poorly and that 1 man had died, which he told me about before my surgery. The rest of the story involves a 14-day hospital stay and a lengthy period at home. For 10 days, I couldn't sleep lying flat in bed since my ribs and sternum had been shattered during CPR. I was having nightmares and couldn't watch anything violent on television. The bright side is that I've dropped 14 pounds. I'm closer to my family, will retire early, and I'm taking care of myself by going to the gym 2 hours a day and eating healthier. I want to leave this position in better shape than I entered it. Before I could start living for myself, I had to die.